I've experienced earthquakes that shake sideways. I've experienced earthquakes that drop, which is hard because it almost feels like your heart's dropping out of your body. I've seen buildings move, buildings like these around us, solid walls moving. I've seen the ground moving, but I've also seen the consequence of what it's done for people's lives.
Disaster and emergency preparedness is a big part of what we do at Royal Roads University, not only in preparing our people for safety, but also in helping to create the leaders who respond to the increasing number of catastrophic events around the world. So Jean, the Great BC Shakeout is on October 20th, I believe, where we learn to and practice drop, cover, and hold. So what happens on a day like that, and why is it so important?
Well, there's several reasons why it's important. First, we live in a seismically active zone, and so earthquakes are infrequent events, but when they occur can be catastrophic in terms of their consequences. So the first reason for having an event like this is just an annual reminder of earthquake risk and the actions we should take to address that risk. Second, the actions that we take on the shakeout day are really simple. We ask people to drop, cover, and hold on. And while that seems like a really simple thing to do, most of the injuries and deaths that occur when an earthquake happens are as a result of flying objects or people falling. So taking that simple action is actually a way of saving lives when an earthquake happens. And then third, there's been research done to talk about what the benefits are. So other jurisdictions like New Zealand have been doing shakeout as well. And they've had some really interesting findings. What they found is that people who participate in shakeout drills are more likely to take the correct action when an earthquake happens than those who've not participated.
So you mentioned, BC is the most seismically active part of Canada. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what else we can do to make sure we are prepared in the event of an earthquake, or in the likelihood of an earthquake.
Sure. So to limit damage and harm, there's lots of things you can do at a household level. One of the sort of secondary impacts of earthquakes is fires. So if, in Victoria region, for example, we have gas lines, or people who live in more rural areas, Metchosin or Highlands, will likely have propane. So having automatic shut-off valves on a gas line can help reduce the risk of a fire. You can strap a water heater, so just a simple metal strap that you can get at Home Depot can be strapped onto a wall. Then thinking about when you drop, cover, and hold, think about those things in your environment that can fly or fall. So as an example, several years ago I looked in my own office and tall bookcases filled with books could fall on me, but could also block the exit from the office when it was safe to leave. So I put in a requisition and had facilities come in and just put some brackets on. So securing objects, you can get a type of putty material for precious objects or other things that could fly and fall, even heavy objects that will hold them securely. You can still pick them up and remove them if you need to, but it would secure those things. So figure out what will fly or fall and try and secure it. So that limits the damage or the harm. But regardless, you're still going to likely to have damage. And so that leads to another action that people often don't think of, which is about having earthquake insurance. And the Insurance Bureau of Canada has found that about only 65% of the population in the Lower Mainland, Victoria region has earthquake insurance. And then it's what can you do after an event. So I think the pandemic's been a good lesson for us in that regard. Have a supply of food, have an safe alternative cooking source. Don't let your gas tank go below half full so that when we have supply disruptions, you'll still have a tank of gas. Have some cash on hand. And then for people who have additional vulnerabilities and needs, so people who have mobility issues might need to ensure that they've got people who can support and check in on and assist them during that time. So there's things we can do to both reduce harm and then to increase our resilience in the period after an earthquake.
Now, Jean, you've actually experienced an earthquake, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that. I've had experience of minor earthquakes, but I understand you've experienced an earthquake, and what was that like?
Well, I've experienced many earthquakes, and it was in Indonesia after the tsunami. I spent 2 years there. And there were many continuous aftershocks during that entire time. I would say earthquakes, the first time that it occurs, it's a bit frightening and a bit disorienting because you don't know what's going on. Yeah. I've seen communities that have been lost and flattened and met people who've lost family members. So I've seen both the physical effects, but I've also worked with people who've experienced the devastating losses.
Yeah. Well, with that experience, I can see it's informed your approach, and the passion you have for disaster and emergency management. So I want to thank you so much for the work you've done here at Rural Roads, you're doing here at Rural Roads, and also for this incredibly timely reminder for us to get prepared. And I'll certainly be participating on October 20th, and I encourage everybody in our Rural Roads community to participate on October 20th. And to take to heart the advice and the tips that Jean's given us. So Jean, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much.